Okay, I think we're on week 6 here, rerunning Entro's Eighth Circuit Brain course. And of course, I've just kind of been doing my own thing here, running through my version of how I see the circuits or the dimensions these days. And I think in the course, we're kind of, I don't know. I know we spent the last 2 weeks playing catch up. Maybe this is a week on Chapel Perilous. I honestly haven't paid attention. But I'm here to talk a little bit, just to give kind of an overview, I guess, again, kind of summarize. I believe we have 8 dimensions of mind based on the 8 circuits of consciousness. Um, I think of them as the infant, the toddler, the preschooler, and the adolescent. And these stages of development become states of consciousness in our mind that are sort of unconsciously running the show. So if we look at each developmental stage and what's going on, we can kind of figure out what that state of consciousness is all about. So the lover, the infant, separates from her creator, mom, but in this case, separating from the creator through the process of birth and a need to feel safe in this world. Without that feeling of safety, which it gets through others, relationship with others, the primary caregivers, mom particularly. Without that, it can feel a sense of fear or terror. And so, yeah, it's about cultivating this sense of safety so that one can allow oneself to be loved and to exude love. Um, Second dimension, the toddler, the warrior. The toddler separates from the mother through toddling, through crawling, through walking, through that process, which kind of starts to create this me, not me boundary. We talk about boundaries. It's like, where do I end and where does the world begin? What is me? What is not me? And defining that sense of self through boundaries. What is me? What is not me? And kind of a diminishment of boundaries can lead is an emotional. This ties into emotional regulation of how do we emotionally regulate at our boundaries. It's kind of esoteric. Maybe I'll have to explain that later to myself as well. But anyway, emotional dysregulation, shame, collapse, diminishment of self, maybe a compensation of ego and rigidness to protect the diminished self. Those are some of the negative qualities of this second dimension. The positive just being a well-defined sense of self. What is me? What is not me? And how do I interact on that boundary and emotionally regulate through my interactions on that boundary? How do I when I say interactions, I mean, how do we make contact with another human being where we meet at our boundaries? We make contact, we're in relationship, and that stirs up emotions, and those emotions need to be regulated. Preschooler is the magician. The magician experiences the duality of nature and consciousness, and that duality complexifies into symbols and map making, conceptual intelligence. So the third dimension is all about the map is not the territory. We learn to make these maps as a preschooler. They help us interact and manipulate and understand the world and make predictions about the future. But we get caught up in them and we don't realize that the map is not the territory. I'm extrapolating that to self-concept. How do we conceive of ourself? What's our conceptualization of ourself? And what parts of ourself are we not owning? We're projecting onto others. So that's kind of can you spot your projections and begin to integrate them kind of thing. Fourth dimension, the adolescent. The adolescent leaves the family of origin and creates its own family or its own role in the village. What do you want that to look like? What is that for you? And there's a lot of what the world expects out of you, what your family, what your society, what your culture expects out of you, and how we take that on versus finding who we really are and what our role in the village really is. And because of that duality between what's expected of us versus what we really want, there tends to be a lot of guilt, and that guilt gets projected onto others through judgment. So we have, again, first dimension, fear and terror, second dimension, shame, third dimension, projections, and fourth dimension, judgments. Those are kind of the layers of these lower circuits, which I feel like are aspects of our soul, what we're born into this world with and what we take on through our development. Versus the upper four dimensions are the spiritual dimensions. When we become safe, held, and loved and allowed ourselves to be love, we're doing that through a unification with our body. We're feeling bliss and joy, and that is hedonic intelligence. Sixth dimension, when we have a clearly defined second dimension sense of self, we can then start to feel, and we're well regulated emotionally, we can then start to feel deeper felt sense intuitions and sort of extrasensory perceptions, let's call them. And that involves a unity with our brain and nervous system, and unity with our energy body, and the ecstasy through that neuroelectric intelligence. Seventh dimension, we start to I'm going to call it now a genetic intelligence. So we're starting to feel this connectedness and unity with all living things. And so we have this duality of consciousness in the third dimension, but we start to feel this connectedness with the world and living things through the genetic intelligence of the sixth circuit. So I'm one with everything, so to speak. And then the eighth dimension is unity that with all that is and was. So it's beyond space and time, or unity with space and time, such as to beyond space and time, if that makes sense. Quantum intelligence. And so again, we have these four states of development that we grew up into that become states of consciousness running in the background unconsciously, states of mind, we'll call it, running unconsciously. And to me, it's about identifying the shadows in those, the fears, the shames, the projections, the judgments, the shadows within our soul, and integrating those. And that opens us up to more spiritual experiences. And likewise, inducing spiritual experiences through committed spiritual practice, through psychedelics, through sheer accident, can expose us to, one, states of being, higher states of being we didn't know existed, and two, can expose our limitations in the corresponding lower dimension. So there's all that. And I guess one aspect I want to introduce to this, there's Antor talks about Chapel Perilous. And what the hell is Chapel Perilous? And it's, to me, we all get a certain rug pull somewhere along our lives, often referred to as midlife crisis, where things we knew and understood to be suddenly just disappear on us, and everything we thought we understood just kind of like, what? Where did that go? Suddenly the world is no longer predictable and no longer certain. And Chapel Perilous to me is kind of like the grand rug pull, where, just the world as we thought it is kind of completely gone out the window, and we're in this place of complete disorientation. And so then the question becomes, well, not a question, I guess what I want to say is I feel like the world is changing in such a dramatic way that we're all experiencing this kind of global Chapel Perilous. We're all going through this sort of midlife crisis as a planetary species right now. And so we're all having to try to find some predictability, try to find some certainty. And so in my mind, that's where this model comes into play that kind of gives us a structure to understand all this and how it works and how it's going on. And then ultimately, what I really think this is about is the hero's journey, which is a process of stepping into Chapel Perilous, or if you're in Chapel Perilous, kind of taking control of the situation and owning what you can control yourself and sort of rebuilding yourself so that you can navigate Chapel Perilous and find out where. I guess it's when we strip everything away, what's left, your core essences, the core of the first four circuits. Can you really tap into that? Can you get through the shadows and the shames and the fears and the projections and really find your core essence and claim it as yours? That's your birthright. That's what you were born into as a human on this little journey here. I don't know. It's almost like Chapel Perilous and Hero's Journey have their own threads I need to go into more detail on, but I feel like I've rambled enough for now. Uh, but I think being born into this world is a hero's journey. Learning to crawl and to walk is a hero's journey. Learning to use language and fine motor skills to manipulate this world and understand it and predict and problem solve is a hero's journey. Separating from your family of origin and finding your role in the village is a hero's journey. And a lot of those just kind of happen on their own, and they're sort of incomplete in us, inside of us. So then when we get these rug pulls that have us face our incompleteness, we have the choice to take a conscious hero's journey into that incompleteness, and in order to integrate it and fully complete it. And maybe that best summarizes what I want to say. Chapel Perilous is the experience of being thrown into the abyss, and the hero's journey is your process of finding your way out of the abyss and discovering who you really are at your core, and how you show up in the world. Yeah, I think that works. I'm going to leave it at that. As Antero once said, define yourself or be defined.